Do you know Photoshop? If so, you may know the Colorize filter. Colorize is a neural filter, which means that it evaluates the content and detail of a photograph based on millions upon millions of photos that have come before it, better known as machine learning. Start with a vintage black and white image, and Colorize pretty much does the rest. It reliably turns the foliage green, it turns skin tones and faces various shades of pink, brown, and orange. It applies all kinds of colors to the clothes, except men's pants, in which case the answer seems to be blue. Now, rather than obsess over the various slider bars, I'm going to focus on using Colorize in context with other powerful retouching tools, including photo restoration and the spot healing brush. How well do they work? Keep watching and find out with me. I'm going to start with the basics of using the Colorize filter here inside Photoshop, and these are the most basic of the basics, by the way, so I'm going to kind of blast through it. Anyway, here's the image we're going to be working with. For what it's worth, it's a real old-timey image. And so here are the steps. I'm basically breaking it into 6 steps, if you will. Very, very basic steps. Step 1 is to convert the image to RGB color. We'll show you what that looks like, but you go to the image menu and you choose mode and you choose RGB color. I guess I'm showing that to you now, but I will show it to you again in just a moment. And then what you do, escape out of there, of course, is you double click on the background and name your new layer, because we want to be working with a layer, and that's because ultimately you want to be working with a smart object, and that way Colorize is fully editable, and it will become extremely obvious why we need an editable filter shortly, but first we just need to do it. All right, and then the next step is to go to the filter menu, choose neural filters, and then, so this is really basic stuff, and then you turn on Colorize, the Colorize filter, and make sure Auto Color Image, the checkbox, is turned on. It is by default, and we want that because otherwise, what's the filter going to do? And then, finally, step 6, confirm that output is set to Smart Filter, because we just made a smart object after all, and then click OK. Okay, what does that look like? I didn't want to sit there and do each and every step while we read the steps. I'm going to do them all at the same time. So here we are, working with a flat JPEG image. Notice that we have a background item, and that's it. Inside the layers panel, you can have layers if you want, and you just be working on one layer at a time. And notice this is a grayscale image. You can tell that up here in the title tab, not because the image is called grayscale, but rather because we can see gray in the parentheses. That's a problem. When you're working in a grayscale image, you can't create color. So what you got to do, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to colorize the image right away, but you go up to the image menu, choose mode, and then choose RGB color. That's what you do. So just go ahead and choose it. It's not going to make any difference. And so you're just going to sit there and think, why in the world did I do that? Well, you just made a bunch of color channels over here in the channels panel. You can see that where before, I'll just go ahead and undo that change. We had one channel called gray. Now, if I redo that change, we now have 3 channels, red, green, and blue. And that way we can generate color. All right, so I'll switch back to the layers panel. So I can double click on the background item here inside that layers panel and just go ahead and give it a name. I'll call this guy Vintage, for example, and then I'll click OK. Now we have an independent layer. All right, now what you want to do is make sure your rectangular marquee tool is active up here at the top of the toolbox. This is the easiest way to work if you ask me. And then right click anywhere inside the image window and choose Convert to Smart Object. You can also right click on the layer. My wife and I have a discussion about whether this is an easier way to work. You can right click on the thumbnail of the layer here inside the layers panel and then choose, well, it didn't come up, did it? I guess that's not the, what? It's right here. Oh, you got to right click on this empty area over here. I don't think that's easier. I disagree with her. And then choose Convert to Smart Object from this extremely long menu. Nope, not for me. Right-click inside the image window with the rectangular marquee tool and choose Convert to Smart Object. And that way, we can now apply Colorize as an editable smart filter. How do you do that? Well, step 4 is to go up to the filter menu and choose Neural Filters, ... not the first one. That's just going to repeat the last thing you applied, although it is going to bring up the window and so forth because it's a smart object, but I digress. Just go ahead and choose the one with the ... and ellipsis afterward. Wait for that window to come up on screen, and then you want to go down here. It's located here nowadays. I'm sure it'll switch around someplace, but notice Colorize. If you hadn't converted the image in advance to RGB color, then this item would be dimmed and it would just sit there and thwart you. So now go ahead and turn it on like so. and make sure auto color image, that checkbox right there, is turned on as by default, and you will have a colorful image as we're seeing right here. So did you see that a moment ago? We were not seeing color. I don't think I have to remind you of that. That's a black and white image right there for you. And now here's a colorized version of the image, all occurring automatically according to this checkbox right here. So Photoshop's doing it for you. And then you just want to drop down to output. Make sure it's set to smart filter. That can get tripped up sometimes, so just make sure it is. And then click OK, and that's all there is to it. And now you've managed to apply neural filters that, well, it's really Colorize, as an editable smart filter, which means I can turn it off to see the original black and white image, and then I can turn it back on in order to see the color image. And then if I wanted to make some modifications to my settings, I could double click on the words neural filters, and that would revisit that window we just saw a moment ago. And those, my friends, are the basics of using the Colorize filter here inside Photoshop. All right, now I'm going to show you how to combine Colorize with photo restoration. But wait a sec, Deke, I hear you say. We're not done with the Colorize filter. What about the adjustment sliders? What about profile? What about manually color image? Oh yeah, those are great, which is why I cover them at length on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Deke now. Anyway, right now, this is more important. Colorize plus photo restoration. Because after all, a typical classic black and white photograph is gonna need both. And so here I am looking at that image that I colorized just a few moments ago. Now, as you may know, photo restoration is a fellow neural filter, and because I took just a little bit of extra time to convert this layer to an indestructible smart object, thereby applying Colorize as an editable smart filter, all I have to do is double click on neural filters to bring back the neural filters workspace, complete with those Colorize settings that I applied, which really are just one setting, this checkbox right here, auto color image. Now what we're going to do in just a moment is turn on photo restoration down here, but first I'm going to turn on skin smoothing, not because we're going to use it, but because it's illustrative, don't you know? So I'll go ahead and turn it on for a moment, and I want you to see all these faces. I'm going to scroll over a little bit here. And notice that every one of the faces that Photoshop recognizes is represented in this menu right here. So we have, in the case of this image, I have 8 faces in all. Now, that's of no never mind where skin smoothing is concerned. I just want you to see that it is of never mind where photo restoration is concerned. Photo restoration, in order to enhance the faces, it needs to see the faces. All right, so I'm going to turn off skin smoothing. And I'm going to drop down to photo restoration right here. Notice that it is in beta currently. And that does mean that it doesn't necessarily behave itself the way it should all the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on like so. And notice that as things stand right now, we have 3 slider bars and then a bunch of adjustments that you don't need to pay any attention to. We're just going to focus on these guys right here. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit right here because I want to keep an eye on these people. Actually, I'm going to zoom in just a little more. Why don't I? So that I can see very, very closely, I can see these 2 female faces up here and these 2 male faces. This kid is not a recognized face for what it's worth. Photoshop just doesn't see it. As things stand now, once again. All right, so we do have a lot of photo grain. So what I'm going to do is just crank the photo enhancement value up to its maximum, which happens to be 100. You might see a little bit of a progress bar, whatever. And so now what I'm going to do is crank up the scratch reduction value to 50. You don't have to nail 50, even if you were working along with me. I just want to make sure that I'm applying some very obvious changes right here. So a lot of scratch reduction. Notice that we have this progress bar right here, which is taking its sweet time. You don't have to wait for it. Let's say you're just like, nah, I don't choose to wait for you, progress bar. I'm just going to go on to enhance face right here, and I'm going to crank it up to 100, at which point we're going to see another progress bar, or at least an extended progress bar. In just a few moments, we should see the faces enhanced. Did you not see that? No, you did not see that. And if you, in your travels, don't see anything happen here in the image preview, then move your eyes to the top right corner of the screen, at which point you should see a warning. you should see that something's gone terribly wrong. Otherwise, something would have happened, right? We're agreed on that. And so let's read this terribly useful message. I love that. We've temporarily disabled this filter because of an error. Who's we? Is Photoshop now the royal we? Now, if I'm not mistaken, the royal we is about the queen, now the king, whatever, and the cohorts, the people that she or he are representing. That's the we. What's the we in this case? You and me, Photoshop and I have I had a hand in temporarily disabling this filter because of an error. I don't think so. Anyway, I think Photoshop's gotten a little high on itself. Or we is all the neural filters working together. Also, maybe, actually, I was going to say I don't think so, but maybe that's it. All right, this is what I'm saying about photo restoration being a beta. It's ornery, don't you know? Just like that kid, that little angelic, little Lord Fauntleroy kid right there. He looks like he's so angelic with his little fingers, but just sitting there holding up his chin. But he's not. He's ornery, and he's the one who's responsible for this bad behavior. Now, I'll tell you something. All you got to do to get things so that they're working again, you just have to dabble with the slider bars. What I figured out is I can't get enhanced face to work along with a big photo enhancement value. I want enhanced face to work, so I'm going to take the photo enhancement value down. Now, it just so happens where this particular version of Photoshop and this particular image are concerned, I have to take the photo enhancement value down to 34. Works. Notice that works great. The message goes away. We are much happier now, including all these people right here. And notice how awesome they look. Wait, okay. You just look at the person of your choice. These 4 faces right here. They don't begin. I'm going to turn off photo restoration for a moment. And they don't begin to have the detail. They're just a bunch of they're not even a bunch of pixels, although they are, but they're also a bunch of film grain. Whereas when I turn this back on, we see these amazingly detailed faces thanks to what Adobe would have you believe is AI. It's not really AI. It's machine learning. And we'll be reviewing that a lot in future weeks, but this is basically Photoshop has seen a lot of images. It's decided this woman looks like this particular person, and wow, there's just so many. I mean, we think we're unique people, but we're not. We're just rubber stamps of people that have existed in a time gone by. All right, so anyway, that looks really cool. Now let's say at this point you're like, all right, I'm done. I think this is good. Check real quick that output is set to smart filter so you don't mess things up, so that things remain editable. And then just go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. And the image is probably, oh, look at that. No, it did. It moved to a different location. Darn you. All right, so just press Control-0 or Command-0 on a Mac in order to center the zoom, and you end up with this collection of beautifully defined faces is what I want to say. This guy's got a little bit of almost like he's wearing one half of a pair of glasses. And then I just want to show you this person, these 2 people in the background. I think they were just wandering by when the photographer took the photograph, but this person, boy or girl, is defined enough to qualify as a face. And then we have these geezers up here who just freak me out. They're like the overlords or something. Like, these are working people. I like these people. These guys are goons. This guy's just angry, bitter from all he's seen over the course of his life. And his son just creeps me out. Anyway, let's focus on these wonderful people right here. Now, let's say you want to make a change. Well, you still have an editable smart filter, don't you, in the form of neural filters right here. I want you to see something, though, okay? I don't know if you noticed before. When I double-clicked on neural filters, I'm going to get to it. Things came up lickety-split. We're seeing the workspace, of course, and then we saw everything applied. Well, this time around, we're not really seeing everything applied very quickly, and that's because photo restoration is a lot more computationally intensive, believe it or not, than Colorize, which is making up colors out of thin air. But I want you to see this. Watch, this thing is still going right here, and yet I can still click on Colorize. I can still switch to it, and I might not see the image up here that I would normally see, but I can modify a value. Hey, I want to crank up the saturation. I'm not going to do so subtly either. I'm going to take it up to plus 30 just for the sheer thrill of it. And then look, oh, did you see that kind of two pass right there? The first pass, we saw photo restoration finally applied, and then we saw the heightened saturation. And then at this point, you could switch to photo restoration if you wanted to, and you could say, this is not a very subtle effect. We have these very carefully defined faces right here that look like they were each painted by hand, by the hand of machine learning. However, the bodies, the textures, the hair, and the dresses and the fabrics and stuff like that, and this boy's entire head, they are more loosely defined. And so if you don't want that much contrast, then go ahead and take the enhanced face value down. I was tempted to take it all the way down to 50. But if you do that, I don't know. I just feel like I really miss those really sharply defined faces. So I'm going to just like kind of split the difference. I don't know, 77 is really splitting the difference, but it's something like that, at which point we see this effect here. And now I'm going to go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. And we end up with these terribly beautiful people right here. And I just so you can see the difference, I'm going to go up here to the file menu. This is the easiest way to do it, and choose the revert command, just so we revert to the image that we saw at the beginning of this part 2 of this movie. That's how things looked just a moment ago, and this is how things look now, thanks to the fact that we were able to combine two neural filters, Colorize and photo restoration, here inside Photoshop. All right, now we're going to talk about the consequences of healing an embedded image. Now, this gets a little more interesting, I shall say. And if you're willing to stick with me, I think you're going to find it quite educational. All right, so what we want to do is apply some manual modifications. We're still restoring the photograph. We've added color, so we've colorized it. We've also done some photo restoration, but we still need to do some healing. And so to make my case, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the image so far. And I want you to notice, I'll go ahead and turn the smart filters off for a moment, that is. So you can see that there's all kinds of what I call detritus in the image. That is, dust and scratches and that kind of junk. And so this woman's hair has this little thing in it. That's not really actually in her hair in real life. It's a function of the photographic process and the scanning and so forth. So it's an artifact. And then we have some stuff in this woman's hair. We could probably make this hair better as well. And then come down to this guy. I want you to see, notice this kind of, what is it? It's a scratch on this guy's arm. Or it could be a hair that was captured along with the scanning process. Now, when I turn the smart filters back on, that goes away. Notice it went away. And that's because of the scratch. That's a function of the scratch reduction value of 50 that I applied using the photo restoration filter. But that's not true with everything, right? We still have some goobers in this guy's shirt right here, all over the place, really. Right here, kind of a divot in his arm that's actually not representative of the original scene. And notice this stays. This did not go away. That thing I just highlighted there did not go away. Notice it's in the original image and it sticks with us. So it was not diminished. It did not get erased. That is to say, let's imagine that's what I want to say, by the scratch reduction value. All right, so what do you want to do? Well, there's a couple of ways to approach this. One is to grab the spot healing brush. That's the way I'm going to work. Some of you prefer to work with the clone stamp tool. I'm not going to have that argument. I'm just going to go ahead and select this tool right here. And then notice by default, sample all layers is turned off. You would want to turn it on and then create a new layer and paint on that layer. And that is going to work beautifully. I'll just create a new layer right here. And then I will go ahead and click right there, let's say. And that makes that little dot go away. And then I could paint this region as well and make that go away. And now you can see it's allocated to that layer. So this is a non-destructive modification because it resides independently on this layer. However, it is, stick with me, a static modification. So non-destructive but static. Not an ideal combination. It's better than destructive, of course, but It's not better than dynamic, and that's because it's not going to update with everything else that's going on inside the composition. So what's a better way to work? We'll press the backspace key to get rid of that new layer. Your cursor is going to change to a Ghostbusters icon, to the universal no icon, because you can't use the spot healing brush on a smart object, because you can't edit the pixels. All right, I want you to see right here that the smart object has a little page icon in its bottom right corner that tells us that it's basically a container. It houses the original image. To see that original image, open up the smart object by double-clicking on its thumbnail. That opens this protective container, and now we're seeing the original image. And now notice we're not seeing a no icon, a no cursor that is anymore, but you don't want to, and so you could paint directly on the image, but that would not only be a static modification, it would also be a destructive one. And so what you want to do instead is create a new layer by pressing Control-Shift-N, Command-Shift-N on the Mac, and I'll just go ahead and call this new layer Healing, let's say, and click OK. And that way, this modification will be non-destructive. It's also going to be dynamic because it's housed inside the smart object. Okay. Alrighty. I'll just keep saying okay and all right a bunch of times. Now, notice the cursor. You can make it bigger by pressing the right bracket key. Make it smaller by pressing the left bracket key. Just want you to see that. All right. Now, make sure that checkbox is turned on. Sample all layers, and then click in the hair, click here inside this woman's hair, click here inside this woman's hair. I'm not going to bore you with actual healing, but I do want you to see a couple of things. Well, first of all, as long as we're here, I'll just go ahead and drag around that thing and make it go away. Now, we have a couple of issues in these women's faces that I just want to focus on here. Notice right here, tiny, tiny little detail. I want to make that go away. Also, right here, she's got a kind of a line on the bottom of her cheek. It's actually at the top of her chin. Kind of in between, really. I don't know what this area is called. And I'll just go ahead and drag over it. You need to be really careful. That's a bad edit, by the way, because that will get enhanced. That face enhancement thing is going to enhance the heck and turn this into a kind of weird fold. So I'm not going to show you that. Just trust me. So you just want to be very careful. And if you need to switch from a spot healing brush to the healing brush tool, or if you prefer the clone stamp tool, by all means, knock yourself out. All right, now this woman has a little thing right there. I'm going to make the cursor slightly smaller and click there. Again, it's not really part of her real face. She doesn't have it in quote fingers. I had my quote fingers up. I didn't really because I'm using a computer. Anyway, I'll just go, but in my mind I did. All right, so this is where I get lost, and I started thinking, oh, it's really important that I actually heal this image, every single little bit of it, so that the people in my wonderful audience know that I'm taking this chore very seriously. But that would be so boring, so I'm not going to do it. We don't have to worry about this thing here, but you might click inside this guy's shirt. Oh, on his right there on his shoulder too. All right, at some point you gotta say enough is enough. You can always come back, by the way. Don't pretend this is your only chance. Come back as many times as you want. Just go ahead and close out of this image and save it. Yes, here in the PC, I think it's a save button. On the Mac, doesn't matter. You get it. I'm sure you can figure that very small detail out for yourself. Now, what happened? Look, it updated, so there's no longer this thing in this woman's hair. And we healed the hairs in general, and I don't know, the thing that was in this kid's hair as well, and oh, that little detail on their dress. All right, but you may look at this and say, wait, Deke, I'm seeing a difference. A moment ago, it was all colorized, and it looked a heck of a lot better than it does now. What happened? Even though the neural filters are still turned on. So here's the smart object, indestructible smart object. Here are the dynamic smart filters that are supposed to update automatically. Well, remember, one of them's a beta filter. And so double click on neural filters to bring up that neural filters workspace right here. And then wait for it. You're going to get this progress bar. You can do other things, right? You can switch to Colorize if you prefer. And, you could even modify a setting or two if you're really in a hurry. But at the end of the day, you're going to kind of have to sit on your hands and wait. But in the fullness of time, you will see the preview update here inside the workspace once again, at which point don't do anything. Just make sure output is still set to smart filter. So I guess that's doing something. You're making sure of something. And now just go ahead and click OK. Don't click cancel. Click OK. click on the blue button. I don't know if they're switched in different places on the Mac and PC. Sometimes that happens. But go ahead and click OK in order to update the image. And so that's what I'm saying. That's a function, presumably, of the fact that photo restoration is a beta filter as things stand now. So maybe in the future it'll behave that much better. But you can see that all of my manual healing brush modifications have been applied. And those, by the way, just so you know, those are the consequences of healing an embedded image, which is the best way to work because it's not only non-destructive, it is also what? Dynamic. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now, naturally, left to its own devices, the Colorize filter doesn't get each and every color exactly right. In fact, it engages in lots of rough approximations. Want to achieve better results? Then go to patreon.com/Deke now and check out my exclusive video in which I show you how to apply your own custom colors and adjustments. Then go to my own Deke.com, create a free account, and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Photoshop Now.